Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Star Wars The Force Unleashed for PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Wii, iOS, N-Gage, Nintendo DS, PSP, and Mac. That is a lot of systems, isn't it? This is an action-adventure hack-and-slash game developed by, well, lots of different people. The PS3 and Xbox 360 versions were done by LucasArts, and they were ported to PC and Mac by Asper Media. Chrome Studios did the PS2, PSP, and Wii versions. InSpace did it on DS. Universomo did the phone versions, basically. And so the end result is this mishmash of developers and a lot of wild differences between some of the versions. The PC, Mac, PS3, and Xbox 360 versions are all pretty much the same. The thing is that it wasn't very well ported to PC and Mac, so you see a lot of technical problems with those particular versions. But PS3 and Xbox 360 versions work fine, and I'm mostly reviewing the Xbox 360 version here. I do also have it on DS and PC. I will only really talk about the PC porting rather than the actual PC version, because I already completed the game on 360 and it's the same game. It's just that it was ported. The DS version plays a bit differently. I don't have any experience with PS2, PSP, Wii, or phone versions of the game, so I'm not going to talk about those at all. But just think about that for a second. All those different systems, and it's all one action-adventure hack-and-slash game, all following pretty much the same plot line with the same characters and everything. It's a pretty big undertaking, and the end result was a pretty mixed reception. So the question becomes, what did they do well, what didn't they do well, and does it really deserve such a mixed reputation? Well, first things first, let's talk about the presentation, which if you're looking at the video, you're probably going, well, that looks terrible. There's all kinds of issues with colors and jagged edges, and texture filtering is all kinds of wrong, that sort of thing. Most of that is a result of the PC version being just complete crap. They didn't port it over very well. The effects really don't work all that well. It just ends up looking like crap. And it really doesn't help that the PC version is also locked to 30 frames per second, which is how it is on console as well. But at least on console it was understandable. On PC there's no reason to lock it at 30 frames per second. You have to get a modded exe file to actually get it to run higher than that. But judging it mostly on the Xbox 360 version's visuals rather than the PC version, it looks okay. There's a lot of good solid animation in particular that's very smooth and fluid, flows together really well, and it's very, very flashy. You have a lot of really cool effects going on when you're flinging things around, and your force effects are going on, like lightning and the force repulse and all that sort of thing. They've done a good job with that, but the texture work is just crap across the board, very low res, and really only the environments look even halfway decent about it. If you get in really close, the textures are extremely blurry, and it really does reek of being a console game. Now, part of this is because they threw in a very advanced physics simulation compared to other games of this type. You will see that a lot of things are getting torn apart, in particular with the Darth Vader footage I'll be showing you, where they're just throwing things all over the place. Trees are shattering and just bits of the environment are crumbling all over the place. You've got all sorts of chaos and devastation. The enemies will just go flying all over the place like ragdolls, and they'll actually latch onto things if they can and just cling to them for dear life before basically falling to their doom. And stuff like that is all very, very cool and lends some intensity to the action, but at the same time, the game just doesn't look particularly good. A lot of the colors just seem off. They don't really have a huge amount of color in the game to begin with. It's okay, but the environments themselves just end up feeling really bland and uninteresting. The characters look kind of odd as well in some respects. A lot of them have very plasticky looking faces in particular. The lip syncing is alright, but that's about it. And they don't do the best in terms of the expressions that the characters have. They often just end up looking almost like dolls. It's kind of unnerving sometimes. That said, the sound design, on the other hand, is pretty good across the board. The sound effects are all very just spot on, I guess is the best way to say it. All the lightsaber effects are just like they sound in the movies. All of the weapons fire and everything exactly as you'd expect from Star Wars. The sounds of flinging things around and everything crumbling around you is all very, very nice. There's very hard-hitting sound effects when you do a lot of the various things that you're doing. The voice acting is generally pretty good. There are a few voices here and there that just end up being a bit odd, but by and large, they do a good job. It's certainly nothing that will take you out of the experience. And then the music is about what you'd expect from Star Wars. It works pretty well. And it's kind of odd, though, because you have this pretty typical Star Wars sounding music, but the action is ramped up to a considerable degree more than what you're used to. So it ends up being a bit odd, but it works fine. It's just that they could have gone with some more intense music if they really wanted to. But obviously what really matter here are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this is set between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and you play as Darth Vader's secret apprentice. You're basically being sent on missions to hunt down Jedi who are remaining after Order 66. And so you spend a decent chunk of the game hunting down Jedi, and you're being trained up so that Vader and you can overthrow the Emperor and rule the galaxy. The fairly typical thing. Only things don't go exactly according to plan, and he ends up sending you on a secret mission instead after being discovered and such like that. And the plot goes just ridiculous from there. It's the kind of thing you would find in a bad fan fiction. And you just look at the plot after the smoke is cleared and you're just like, wait, what? This makes no sense. For one, Starkiller is just a blatant Mary Sue character. And that's about as best as I can sum him up. He has barely any personality at all. He's ridiculously overpowered for no discernible reason. And you just spend the entire game basically being, oh, well, savior, or whatever. And the plot just is completely uninteresting. You don't give a crap by the middle of it. And so you sit there wondering why you're even playing to begin with, and then you realize, oh wait, I'm playing it because the gameplay is actually kind of somewhat interesting. It's an action-adventure hack-and-slash game. Most of what you're doing is running around from point A to point B, just annihilating everything in your path. The way you do that is what's interesting. Obviously you have your lightsaber. That's pretty straightforward. The issue I have with that is that it's like what one of my friends described as a wiffle bat. Instead of slicing limbs off left, right, and center, it just kind of sends enemies flying. It's like you're smacking them with a wiffle bat. So that's not as satisfying as it could be. You have your basic 4-hit combo where you just tap the button over and over and over again, and you'll eventually get to the last hit of the combo, which will actually send enemies flying. Or if you unlock later on, you can get the more advanced combo where you can just pause between hits, and you'll do a much more advanced combo that does more damage. But it also takes more time. And there's a variety of combos available to you that will chain your lightsaber and your various force powers together. For example, the force sling, where you'll hit them twice with the lightsaber and then use force push to fling them away. You have a handful of powers available to you, and you unlock them gradually throughout the game. The first of these is, of course, your basic force push. Pretty self-explanatory. But you can unlock a advanced version of it where you can charge up the force push and send things flying with immense force. There's also force lightning, as you would expect from Sith, and force repulse, which is basically, if you would imagine, a force push done in a 360-degree arc around you. Basically this sphere of force push that sends things flying. It's pretty cool, actually. But the powers themselves are fairly limited, and unlocking them requires you to level up, which means that you have to take out enemies, you have to get force points by finding holocrons scattered throughout the entire game. They're those glowing orange boxes, basically. And you can find either force points or, say, force spheres or combo spheres. Those are what you use to upgrade. Or they will contain things like lightsaber crystals, where they'll give you bonuses, or they'll just change the lightsaber color. One of the lightsaber colors is black, because apparently that's a thing. But by and large, you'll find that these holocrons contain force points, and then you can level up, get more access to more advanced powers or versions of those powers, because you do have to unlock them by playing the campaign first. So you can't use Force Lightning until you've unlocked it by going to basically the second level of the game, so on and so forth. And by the end, of course, you have all of the powers, and you have probably upgraded them all to their maximum of potency. You have force talents that are passive abilities, basically. Things like increasing your health regen, increasing your health amount, that sort of thing. And so it's a pretty straightforward action-adventure hack-and-slash game by and large. You go from point A to point B, you slaughter everything in your path. You might have to activate something or solve a very, very rudimentary puzzle. That's kind of it. There's occasional platforming segments, and the platforming can get kind of annoying in this game. In some respects, due to the camera not always being the most reliable. Usually it's fine, but sometimes it'll just weird out on you, and that gets pretty annoying. And sometimes it's just finicky with regards to the actual platforming, so that can be problematic. The combat is really the draw, though. It's basically a power fantasy game, where you just run around and you wreak absolute havoc. And this is where the game actually excels pretty well. Once you have all of your powers unlocked in particular and upgraded all the way, you just become an unstoppable juggernaut of death. And that can be rather satisfying. Because, I mean, let's face it, who wouldn't want to take on entire armies of stormtroopers and just send them flying off cliffs and things like that? That said, where the game fails miserably is that it can be extremely frustrating. And this is due to a variety of factors. First, when you're actually unlocking all your powers and going through the game normally, you find that you're not really capable of taking all that much damage. And your powers are weak enough that you can't really just wreak havoc upon all of your foes. You can definitely do a lot of damage, but if you get sufficient numbers of them, they'll very easily take you down. And particularly when you get the guys who have rapid fire weapons, that becomes problematic. Once you've unlocked more abilities and you become much more powerful, those guys don't really serve much of a threat anymore, or pose much of a threat. And so you find that there's this weird disconnect between the early game and the end game. The end game is better than the early game, just because of this. Just because you have all these powers now. And so, between those points, you have a period of just on and off incredible frustration. Frustration with the controls not always working properly. For example, with the force throw and force grip, it doesn't always work the way you want it to. You'll probably be seeing in this video on occasion where I was trying to throw an object at a certain enemy, for example, the ATCT, and it just wasn't throwing it right at the enemy. It didn't target them properly. And that sort of thing happens all the time, and it's really very noticeable that this is a console game and that they didn't really have as good of a targeting system as they probably should have. And then, of course, there are the boss fights. They're very bland, uninspired. Follow the enemy attack pattern until they create an opening, then attack them with whatever they're weak against. If they're weak against force push, you send them flying, and then you go up and whack them a few times with your lightsaber. If they're resistant to lightsabers or resistant to force push, then maybe you should try force lightning or something like that. And they're all very predictable. You've pretty much done this in a lot of other action-adventure hack-and-slash style games. It's nothing new. The difference is that it's Star Wars themed. And then, of course, there are quick time events. There's actually a fair number of quick time events in this game. A lot of them are just finishing moves, but other times it just gets annoying. The finishing moves are certainly very flashy and cool, but you sit there wondering, well, why couldn't I just do this earlier? Because you have things like ATSTs in half with your lightsaber, and I do mean in half, as in you see the guys who were piloting the thing falling out of it as they fall to their doom. It's things like that that just make it ridiculous. And so you're just sitting there like, why couldn't I do this before? Why did I have to do all this damage to it and then just do a quick time event? That's annoying. And there's one particularly annoying segment where the concept is cool. You're bringing down a Star Destroyer with the Force. That should be awesome. But it's not. It's one of the most infuriating parts of the entire game because of how they decided to do the controls. It's basically just you have to manipulate it using analog sticks and such. It gets ridiculous. There's all sorts of things trying to fly in your face, and it was the most infuriating part of the game for me. And once you get through all of the super flashy animations and the utter chaos that you're creating, you realize that the game's just really shallow. There's not a lot to it. You're just running around whacking stuff in the face at its core, really. And maybe doing a jumping puzzle here and there. Nothing particularly strenuous. You've done this all before. It's just that this is a Star Wars game. And it has the Force. And the Force is being unleashed. But it's not being unleashed in the way that you really want it to be unleashed. The advertisements for the game made it seem really, really awesome with the amount of ridiculous, super-powered Force stuff that you're seeing. And the actual gameplay doesn't really have that sort of thing. It's certainly got its moments, but by and large, this is a pretty by-the-numbers hack-and-slash game with the Star Wars name tacked onto it. It's not terrible. You can certainly get something out of it if you're into this sort of thing, or if you just want to have your power fantasy. But obviously the power fantasy bit doesn't really come in until you've actually beaten the game and you're playing through missions again. So that becomes problematic. All in all, it's a pretty mediocre game. I give it a 2 out of 5. Thanks for watching.